With Klay Thompson looking spry after 2.5 years, an all-star version of Andrew Wiggins along with MVP Steph finally regaining form to the tune of 28 points on 48% shooting, Golden State's spacing offensively is truly immaculate. Despite doubters claiming he could never get back to full form, Klay was back to himself in every fashion, manipulating defenses by perfectly cutting off pin downs. He threw down a nasty poster in an ISO situation and knocked down 3 of his patented triples. Based off Klay resembling his all-star self, the already vicious depth and top-heavy talent of the Dubs, fueled by the passing and defending king in Draymond, and 2 incredible role players in Gary Payton II and Otto Porter Jr., not to mention the beastly Jordan Poole. Stay tuned to see why the Warriors are officially overpowering, as one of the greatest shooters of all time reacclimates himself into the already vicious lineup. Before continuing, only 11.2% of you watching are subscribed, so if you haven't already, please subscribe. Also leave a thumbs up, it takes a few seconds and makes a massive difference. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at DFlowHoops and I'll follow you back. Link is in the description for both those platforms. After 2 rough L's on a back-to-back versus the Pelicans and Mavericks on the road, the Dubs were back to business by defeating the Cleveland Cavaliers 96-82 on Sunday. Having said that, there's some games where you instinctively lose track of the box score and can't help but to just bask in the joy of the moment and possibilities for the future. The return of one of the greatest three-point marksmen and two-way shooting guards ever in Klay Thompson was always going to be celebrated worldwide, regardless of Golden State's opponent, and no matter what the end result ended up being. The grueling rehab process that Klay was forced to go through back-to-back times, leading to a near 3-year absence, all led to this long-awaited, monumental outing. The flurry of emotions for Dubs fans in the building had already stormed through, so much so that even a loss wouldn't have placed a damper on the return of a man who'd given so much, but lost plenty in return. Klay's numbers following Golden State's W against Cleveland gave the impression of a returning player who performed much better than expected, but simultaneously, Thompson, of course, couldn't avoid the moments of resembling a man experiencing his first real NBA action in 941 days. Thompson's 17-point showing on 18 shots, 4 of 10 on 2s, 3 of 8 on 3s, you can take that as both an encouraging sign and a sign of a work in progress. Biggest factor you can take away from Klay's debut, who spent the majority of the last 2 years rehabbing while taking trips out on his boat with Rocco, is that there was little rust in terms of his overall movement and energy. Thompson was extremely active working without the ball, maneuvering off down screens and relocating towards the opposite side of the court, and also improvising by looking for any open pocket of space available in which he could cut through. For example, Golden State's very first offensive possession saw Klay come off a simple wide down screen. The man's eagerness to put the rock on the deck and burst all the way to the paint for buckets at the rim, despite suffering consecutive major lower leg injuries that typically zap all the mental confidence from one's driving game, was shocking to witness. Even more impressively, the possession on your screen right now wasn't drawn up to be a play for Thompson to finish. Steve Kerr spoke on Thompson's first shot saying, "I drew the first play up not for him, but for him to catch it and move it on. I should have known better. He just caught it and drove and scored. It was a phenomenal moment." End quote. The mental aspect is going to be the toughest obstacle to hurdle for Thompson as he tries to find his rhythm following a torn ACL and ruptured Achilles. It may have seemed simple for Klay to attack the bucket like he did, with the confidence from the past acting as fuel to his fire, but that nagging feeling from deep within can all too easily plant seeds of doubt. Understandably, Thompson revealed in interviews before returning that he had those very demons in his psyche. Klay was on the record as stating, "Can I still do this? Will I be able to land on my feet safely without fear of the worst reoccurring? I don't want to have to go through this painful climb back to the top again. Maybe I should take it easy." But that mindset, which, if the throwdown on your screen right now were any indication, didn't register whatsoever within Thompson's mind when he stepped on an NBA court again. Thompson's habitual nature as a shooter and ISO pick-and-roll shot creator has always done leaps and bounds for his ice-cold mentality, which fluently translated to his belief in himself in terms of moving around on the court like the spry, pre-injury version of himself. Meanwhile, for a player who's had to hurdle that mental challenge of moving around post-injury without fear himself, Kevon Looney finds it unsurprising that Thompson was unfazed by the prospect of having to be mobile and agile again upon his return. Looney said when Klay was rehabbing, he had 100% confidence in his body. He was out there moving around, he didn't look scared doing any type of movements, and I know from experience that's just kind of the last thing that comes. It took me a while for me to get over that fear of being able to trust your body. He seems like he's already there. He's out there not just to fit in, but to be an all-star type player." End quote. Whether Klay decided to somewhat limit his movements, opting to take it easy in his first game, getting his feet under him, Klay being on the court in the first place acted as a potent reminder for other top contenders of the incredibly tough-to-stop problem that he and Curry presented to defenses all throughout the 2010s decade. Both Splash Brothers being intact, the greatest shooting tandem in the game's 75-year history, that's proven time and time again to be a championship-winning formula. As the 21st player in all-time three-point makes, Klay Thompson dropped his first triple of the night, and the first one in 2 years. A team that thrives on forcing opponents to pick their poison added another lethal toxin to their arsenal. Gone are the days of being forced to imagine a world where defenders, splitting the difference on the weak side, will have to choose between a 41.8% three-point shooter in Wiggins and a career 41.9% shooter in Thompson. Now, that's a reality. On this possession, Seti Osman opts to try and stop a kick-out to Wiggins in the corner, leaving Thompson open for a practice shot on the wing. Driving lanes for attackers like Poole, Wiggins, GP2, Otto Porter Jr., and Steph, among others, are seamlessly manipulated, all because Klay spots up in the corner, with his defender completely unwilling to detach. That extra space and all-time great distance threat that Klay provides eliminates a potential help defender, allowing for his fellow Splash Bros Stephen Curry to get his game going more seamlessly. For example, watch this drive off a double drag screen that garners Steph an easy opportunity at the rim. Then, out of a timeout on a baseline out-of-bounds play, this fake handoff to Thompson works as a decoy on the weak side, deploying a hammer set for Deadpool, a scenario where Steph's usually the decoy, but Klay, who now demands just as much attention from defenses, serves as a more than stable substitute for this action. As you might expect, it's going to be quite some time before we see Klay regain a flow on both ends, but there's no need to panic if you're a Dubs fan because after rehabbing for a significant stretch of time, Klay's going to have all the time he needs to do what he does best, let deep-range bombs fly, no matter how contested he is, without a care in the world, until he inevitably recaptures that unconscious rhythm that we got accustomed to seeing in the previous decade. The true evaluation of Klay's condition may be defensively. Once considered the best stopper at the shooting guard spot, his on-ball perimeter defense against marquee guards and wings, especially when the Warriors need a stop at the very most, is what saved the Warriors on several occasions against the number 6 seed in the Eastern Conference during Sunday night's bout. While I've done my best to hype up Thompson's return, we can't forget that once the adrenaline and the excitement of a long-awaited comeback ultimately calms down, Klay's going to have to deal with the prospect of getting in the ideal game shape to sustain the grind of the season and playoffs. Don't be surprised if guards that you'd assume he can keep up with burst right past him off the dribble. This defensive possession is a closeout that pre-injury Klay would have easily recovered from. Adjusting himself to the speed of the NBA may take a shorter amount of time than expected. Conversely, it could be a slow and steady process. Regardless, Klay has the benefit of experience and muscle memory imprinted within the fabric as a defender. He's previously shown off the propensity to adjust and recover from his mistakes. Some possessions were more indicative of Thompson's old self. He gets switched onto Darius Garland on this possession. Aside for the late foul call, which could have gone either way, Thompson mostly stuck with the speedy Garland, using his length and height advantage to make the young Cavs star work. The soon-to-be two-time DPOY Draymond Green once laughed when expressing his thoughts about a hyper-small crunch-time unit of Curry, Poole, Wiggins, Thompson, and himself at the center spot. While Klay's never spent a good chunk of his playing days as a stretch 4, having him as a small ball power forward would require him to defend much bigger men who may hunt for a perceived mismatch in the low post. Thompson's current limit in terms of lateral movement may see him be eased into defending relatively stationary assignments, such as opposing bigs. That may put a strain on his body in ways other than having to move around, but on switches against Cleveland bigs, he may have got scored on a few times, but he did ultimately find the strength to budge them out of their spots But there's more difficult challenges coming up on the schedule for Thompson. Switching against someone as athletic and explosive as Ja Morant could be potentially an issue. Depending on which end of the upcoming road back-to-back Thompson plays in, the Chicago Bulls' Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan will present additional challenges, and the Milwaukee Bucks' Chris Middleton may have Thompson on him for a couple possessions as well. As the extensive rehab process and time spent away from the game he loves has proven, he isn't one to shy away from adversity, which Thompson touched on post-game, saying, "I was so grateful to just compete again. It's been a long road, but I'm also just proud of myself for persevering. It was a special moment. I'll never forget." I'm not going to say it was equivalent to winning a championship, but man, it was pretty freaking close. So, with Thompson back, Air Canada Andrew Wiggins steps back to be a number 3 option instead of having to carry the burden of being a number 2 guy. Obviously, there's a lot of shot-creating pressure taken off Steph as well. But maybe the scariest factor of them all is that Golden State's far from a finished product. The team's still expecting the number 2 pick from 2020's draft and James Wiseman to return, which boosts their front court depth behind Kevon Looney. Also, this team makes some extremely costly turnovers that can be easily quelled with a bit more focus. The W in Klay's return improved the Dubs to 30-9, and now they travel to Memphis for a showdown against the steaming Grizzlies, who've won 9 straight. Can't wait for that high-quality matchup on Tuesday night. What's the most dangerous aspect of Klay's return? Best answer in the comments earns next video's shoutout. The top 5 commenters with the most shoutouts by March 21st receive NBA merchandise of their choosing this spring, so leave your take on today's question to compete in Community Speaks. Today's Speaks winner is Devin Sedodal, who says the best rookie in my opinion is Scotty Barnes. I definitely didn't expect him to be as good as he is. He's very long, fast, and athletic. Those 3 characteristics make him the perfect storm in today's game. This allows for tons of switchability on defense. He can guard just about any position. Pause to read the rest of Devin's elite take. Thanks for every answer. Hope you have a great one. D-Flow signing off.